Hi guys, hello and welcome to Jazz Across the Pond. Jazz Interviews Reimagined, a brand new and a very exciting bringing together of two great nations. It's jazz talking like you've never seen or heard it before. And I think it's about time we nip over to the other side of the pond, to the United States of America, where there's my partner in crime, eagerly waiting to join us. And there he is from the United States of America. He's there awaiting. Good evening, good afternoon, good
Good
morning,
evening.
depending on time zone.
Hey, I just say howdy. How
My
you doing, Jazz Cat? How you
Hey,
doing?
I'm pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, the sun's shining here in the UK and we're all making the most of it.
I bet.
I think we're in for what they call an Indian summer, where the September is quite nice.
Well, I hope so for your sake.
Why, thank you. So it's a warm welcome and to Jazz Across the Pond, Jazz Interviews Reimagined. From me, Roger Lee, aka the Jazz Cat from the United Kingdom.
And I'm Kevin Goolsby from the United States, and they call me Mr. G.
Mr. G, Mr. G. Well, they call you Mr. G, but of course I like to refer to you as the Officer Charlie Dibble to my top cat.
Wow. Okay, so I'm Officer Dibble to your top cat.
Yeah, well, I'm the Jazz Cat.
Have you been hitting the catnip, Roger? I mean, I remember the cartoon show about Top Cat who lives in an alley in New York City and lives with this like mischievous fan of tomcats. It was kind of strange. That cartoon actually was broadcast in the evenings,
Yeah.
and then rebroadcast on Saturdays. But I don't think there's a tie-in with today's guest, so
No,
I'm
it was
concerned
just
you
one.
may be having. I'm concerned you may be having an identity crisis, Roger. You are the Jazz Cat, not Top Cat.
Wow, I've been called worse.
Well, and you may be a little cartoonish too, but no.
No,
You're
no.
the Jazz Cat. You're the Jazz Cat, and I am Mr. G.
Right, you are. That clarified.
Okay.
Let's move on. Last week, I
Officer
think we
Dibble,
were both
go ahead.
stunned with last week's interview. I mean, we both sat, and if anybody sits back and watches it, they'll go, they can see that we were in awe of that young man. And in years to come, when that young man, he grows up and that, and I mean, it's the first ever interview in the in Europe, and he agreed to be on this show, and that's which we're very, very proud of. And the thing is, he was 13. He's now 14. I mean, he's getting a bit old now. He's 14 now, but as a composer, arranger, producer, multi-instrumentalist, and we're talking the man himself, young Justin Lee Schultz from his album Groove Kid. And what a stunning album.
It really is. Like truthfully, I mean, and of course, if you go and watch the interview, you find out why legendary jazz players like Bob James and Gerald Albright, Jonathan Butler, Najee, and Pieces of a Dream, just to mention a few, are on that project.
Yeah, totally agree. It's a
it was only 13 when it was recorded. That's right.
Oh, and he's got such an amazing career in front of him. He really has.
Really does, no doubt about it.
So a brilliant interview. It's well there. You can find it on YouTube. Just tap into it, and amongst all the other catalogue, the archive of ours. And yeah, brilliant interview. Anyway, so tonight's interview. Now I'm just peering at the screen, and yes, the man himself from Washington, D.C. has just appeared into the green room. He's sitting there eagerly, anxiously waiting to come and join the two of us and have a chat about his new album. Now, we've heard the album. It was only released on the 20th of August. I mean, it is still smoking. It's that hot, all right? It is fabulous. And I think we both agree it is a wonderful album. And the 26th album in his career.
Amazing. It's amazing. Well, we'll talk more about, the new project and about our guest history as well, but he's pretty amazing. I've been following him from day one.
1990.
Because he is just up 95, on the other side of DC. So yeah, good stuff.
Amazing stuff. So, ladies and gentlemen, I said he's eagerly waiting in the green room now, and we're eagerly waiting to have a chat with him. And I spoke to him a couple of days ago, and he is such a gentleman. He is so nice, and it's going to be wonderful to talk to him. Ladies and gentlemen, Jazz Across the Pond, Jazz Interviews Reimagined, are very, very honoured to be welcomed the man himself, Mr. Ken Navarro. And the brand new album, I Will Still Be Here. Well, we hope in 4.5 minutes' time, after we play this track tonight, he will still be here in the green room. Did you like the link on that?
That's pretty good. Yeah, just don't jinx us, Jazz Cat. Wasn't there a Jinx the cat too? I don't know. Oh my gosh, I may have given you an idea for next week.
Ladies
All
and
right, well,
gentlemen,
enough
sit
of
back.
the parole. Let's invite him in. What do you think?
I think so. Let's play a piece of his music from his brand new album. And I've listened to it. I played a track or two on my radio show last night, Jazz Moods, and a lot of the listeners were going, wow. And they're going to say, wow, once we meet this gentleman. Ladies and gentlemen, Ken Navarro. The album is called I Will Still Be Here. The track we're going to play is called It Gets Better, in brackets. It Gets Better. Well, I'll tell you something. The album does get better and better. But I'm saying that this isn't a duff track. This is a fabulous track. Sit back, enjoy this, and we'll be here with Mr. Navarro momentarily.
Hi, this is American jazz guitarist Ken Navarro from Washington, D.C., and you are watching me on Jazz Across the Pond with the Jazz Cat and Mr. G. I hope you enjoy.
Well, the track is called It Gets Better. I don't know if it could get any better because that is the most amazing track. It really, really is. And we're so very pleased to have the man himself. It's a track from his brand new album. What can we say about this week's very, very special guest? Multi-talented American contemporary guitarist, jazz guitarist. Our special guest has worked in the studio, musician across America, performing the likes of David Koz, Neil Carter, just to mention a few. Ladies and gentlemen, Jazz Across the Pond, Jazz Interviews Reimagined. We warmly welcome the man himself, Mr. Ken Navarro.
Thanks, you guys. Really nice to be here, and an honor that you asked me to do this with you. I'm glad that you did.
Not at all. It's the honour's ours. It's fabulous to have you. I mean, we nearly interviewed last year when you came out with your last album, the Into the Light Now, and then for different reasons it couldn't happen. So I'm very, very grateful to finally now have you there on the screen, and it's going to be so much better than on the phone. I tell you, it's going to be so.
Much better. Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
Like you can see my subtle shirts as well.
Right, anyway. That's right. Unfortunately, I'm not quite attired as well, but that's all right.
Oh, I like to upstage people. Never mind. Right, Ken Navarro's new album, the 2021, I Will Still Be Here. We must admit, just prior to you joining us, and we could see you appear in the green room waiting, and I was like, well, I hope you'll still be. We're here at the end of the track, and here you are. Has released a worldwide album. It came out on August the 20th, so literally, it's still smouldering. It's still hot. All right. Once again, this renowned guitarist puts in a consummate display of guitar mastery as he steers the instrument through its unique styling through the diverse array of colors and emotions. This is Ken's 26th album, and it features 11 contemporary jazz compositions with Ken's superb acoustic and electric guitar work throughout. Ken, great album. We're going to be talking more about the album, but let's just take you back a little bit. Your musical beginning, your childhood, with your introduction to the jazz world. Did you come from a musical family? And please tell our followers more about that, please.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Not a particularly musical family. I mean, my dad tapped on everything in sight. My mother would watch American Bandstand and say the equivalent of that's pitchy, but nobody ever actually was performing or playing anything. They started me taking piano lessons when I was about 5 years old. And I was just by the luck of the draw, I was fortunate to have a teacher who was not just teaching me how to play piano, but teaching me about music, simple music theory and ear training. And so that served me well when about 6 years later, I tuned into the Ed Sullivan Show and saw the Beatles. And of course, became fixated on the guitar. And to the point where I even built one out of a piece of wood and rubber bands and nails. I mean, it was dangerous more than it was anything else. But it really prepared me well because I learned to play the guitar by applying what I'd learned on the piano, but also by just, remember the transistor radios we all used to have growing up. Now we have iPhones, not all that different, except they sound better. But that's how I learned to play. I figured out stuff by ear and then figured out how to play it on the guitar. And so that early piano instruction, it planted the seed of performing because I just really loved doing all of that. But it also really, because of the teacher I had, set me up to be able to do things by ear, which is, of course, what almost all popular music and jazz in particular is about. And then I didn't get into jazz. I mean, I was into all the 60s stuff, a combination of Motown, which was really big then, combined with all the English stuff that I was way into, starting with the Beatles and all the obvious stuff, but eventually got into Cream and Eric Clapton. And, we forget how improvisational that period of music was in rock. I mean, I can remember I had a French class because I just didn't want to get called on. So I would kind of put my head on the desk and I would play through the two solos in Light My Fire. Remember there was the Doors song, the guitar solo and the keyboard solo, and I had them memorized. And so that's what I would do while I hoped that my French teacher wouldn't call on me. So improvisation was a big part of music, back then, and the music we grew up with. So I didn't get into jazz until a very far-sighted senior in high school turned me on to John Coltrane. And even though I had no idea what was really going on or how he was doing what he was doing, it appealed to me the same way that Eric Clapton's guitar tone or Jimi Hendrix's guitar tone appealed to me. I just felt the energy and the excitement. Later on, learning that Coltrane was so guided by a real spiritual purpose and an intensity of of a work ethic, bar none. It all makes sense that it hit me that way, but it didn't hit me that way intellectually. It just hit me that way, music. And so that began my journey into jazz. And I like to think what I've done is basically combine all of that jazz and improvisational influence with all the great songwriting, be it the Beatles or Motown, that I grew up with. And that to me is, what I do now. I kind of try to put those two things together with an ear for a great melody and a great song, but at the same time, trying to use musicians who, like me, are comfortable making things up, yet playing the song, if you know what I mean. It's that balance of creativity, but serving the song, which is what I think the best smooth jazz, the best contemporary jazz does really well when you hear those two things happening. So with it gets better. That's a pretty good example of, if you listen to the drum track, I told him I wanted like a New Orleans sort of Zydeco feel, but I wanted him to give me moments. And in fact, I told him, I referenced Stuart Copeland from the Police, because I love all the little moments that Stuart created in that music. And that's what I told the drummer on this one. And so that's what I mean about a jazz layer involved in everything, a player who's reacting to the moment, not just, oh, here's the verse, here's the chorus, and like that. So, and I think in the last part of the song where I'm improvising and he's really interacting with me, especially the last 20 seconds or so, you can really hear, what the magic that can happen when you put those two things together.
Well, Roger, it's funny to hear Ken talk about the music of his past and experimenting around. Ken, I played 2 instruments, clarinet and bassoon.
Oh, wow. And, oh, my gosh.
I'll never forget the day that I was in the practice room when our band director came in to start class, and about 7 of my classmates were in a practice room with me, and they're very small. Mm-hmm. He's wondering where everybody is. He knocks on the door. Kevin has figured out how to play the intro to Iron Butterflies In-Gadda-Da-Vida.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Womp, 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 womp,
oh, yeah, I can hear that on either the clarinet or the bassoon.
But we digress. So, Ken, in 1990, you released your debut project, The River Flows, on your own record label, Positive Music, and your second album, After Dark, the following year in 1991, was considered for a Grammy Award. That's amazing unto itself, and congratulations on an amazing start to your career. But since the release of The River Flows 31 years ago, you have released 20, as Roger said, 25 additional solo projects featuring an incredible list of guest and featured artists, including Dave Weckl, John Patitucci, Chad Wackerman, Brandon Fields, and Eric Marienthal, just to mention a few. Mm-hmm. And as producer and record label owner, you've also worked with notable jazz artists Greg Karukas, Tom Rotella, Eric Darius, Tony Craddock Jr., Tom Braxton, a friend of mine, and Jay Rowe. Again, just to mention a few. So Ken, if you would share with our viewers, from your perspective as performer and producer, how the music industry has shifted since your debut album in 1990 to your latest project this year. In other words, what adaptations have you employed to navigate the ever-changing waters of the music industry?
Yeah, a great question. I'm thinking just a moment, because I've had to re-steer the boat several times, because when we started in 1990, fax machines were the state-of-the-art technology. Hard to believe, but that was it. The fact that we could fax radio, for example, like information on a Thursday before, say, they reported on a Friday, the fact that we could hit 100 stations in probably about 2 hours, because you had to do one at a time. But, that was like a big deal. So when we started, that was CDs and even cassette tapes we manufactured. And of course, there were stores everywhere. And we all know what that scenario was like. Tower was a real force worldwide. When it changed to iTunes and the emphasis became on downloading, we had to shift gears again, where it was sort of half and half. And then streaming took us in a whole nother area. Now streaming is really, for me personally, the source of, I don't know, 90% of my income. And not to be tooting my own horn, but because I own everything that I record and I own all the publishing for my writing, I do quite well with the streaming services. You hear stories about how people have all these plays and they don't get paid. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not true if you're like me and you own everything. It's actually better now than it was before. Now, I'm lucky that the streaming services have decided that I'm one of the, whatever blessed few that they really highlight for a particular genre. So I do understand the frustration that some people feel. But yeah, we've had to adapt over and over and over again. I remember for an album I did in 2005 called Love Colored Soul, I actually made a DVD series to go with it, where I interviewed all the musicians on the album. Oh, I had another one called Be the Guitar, where I took a song and explained how I played the guitar. And these were all extras that I used to sell. And now that seems really outdated, the idea of selling DVDs and all of that. Now we kind of give all that stuff away for free, on YouTube and so on. But yeah, I mean, we still work with a distributor. We still sell CDs. But whereas we would consider 10 to 20,000 CDs of a jazz release a financial and commercial success, was just the reality of jazz music. Now, if I sell a couple thousand of this new album, which looks like I'm online to do, that'll be really good, because that's just a small little piece of the pie now. So that's a little hard on me as an artist, because I really want people to hear the sound the way I mixed and mastered it in my studio. And a CD is really the only way you really hear that, at least right now. And I also, the cherry picking that people do, where they grab one song and I get it, I do it too. But the fact is that I make albums, and I'm really looking at them like a book with a bunch of chapters, and they're very carefully laid out that way. And so, it's a little frustrating as an artist, but what are you going to do? You have to go with it. And I've spent a fair amount of time mentoring other musicians whose names I won't mention, because you've heard of a lot of them, who have come to me going, how do I do this? I can't do it the old way. What do I do? What do you do? And how do you do it? And I pass that information on freely in hopes that they will also be able to grab the wheel and turn into what's going on. So yeah, it's a tough. I'm sorry, my question's a little bit scattered, because so much has changed, in the 30 years since we started Positive Music, and changed again.
Just to make you feel a little bit that I can totally appreciate what you're saying there. Prior to 1990, I was entertainment stage manager on the cruise ships out of New York.
Wow, yeah.
And I was playing vinyl as the DJ, all right? And so if you were going for a storm, we used to get quarters and put chewing gum and stack them on the end of the stylus to weigh them down. And then, you'd start a record. We used to cut a whole groove for the whole thing. It was like, it doesn't matter, it would go through it. And it was just so fun. And then we would dock somewhere, and the pleasure of New York and going up to a Tower Records and pick it up on album and open it up and find that the musicians on it and who produced it. Even with your albums, there's nothing nicer than going, wow, who was on this and that? And I think the youngsters today are missing out on that, because they cherry pick. You're actually right. They'll go, well, I don't like that track, and they're not listening, because most of the albums, like your albums, they tell a whole story from the first track right the way through.
I try. I'm not saying I'm always successful, but it's certainly my intent. Yeah, no, that thing about, as you can see, small print or not, and the older we all get, the more I have to get on the art director to make sure that we can read that print. Because it's hard to put all those credits inside, a single page of a CD booklet. But I believe in it, and I think all these players are important. I mean, it's me, it's my ideas, it's my direction. And of course, this new album, I Will Still Be Here, was produced virtually, because I recorded with people all over the country, but none of them in my studio, like they normally would be. And that's a whole nother skill. Fortunately, most of these people I've worked with for a long time, so they know me, they know what I'm looking for. They know how to read my emails, because let's face it, you can say something in an email that all you're trying to do is get a better performance. And a player who doesn't know you could go, what a jerk, criticizing me like they don't know that they don't necessarily have a relationship with you. So these people all did. And so everybody was, just worked and worked till we both went, this is great, and then moved on. But I feel they all should, besides getting paid, they should all get credit.
Absolutely.
Especially in jazz music, because these are not background musicians. They're all important. And even the drummer, who it's very easy to think of drummers as like, they're keeping the time and so on. To me, if the drummer's great, the whole band is great. If the drummer's not, doesn't matter what you do, it's going to always sound compromised. So, I actually use 3 different drummers on this album because different people do different things better. They all do everything, but some of them specialize in something and are just like Jay Williams, who was the drummer on Embrace and 3 or 4 other songs. He's just like the best groove meister I've ever worked with. And that's why Dave Koz and Dave Sanborn and a zillion other people use him, because I remember the first time I played with Jay, it was a live gig, and I was just like, wait a minute, what's happening here? This never felt like this before, and I played with some good people. But then there's another drummer out of Nashville, a virtuoso named Bruce Guttridge, that played on It Gets Better, who I was referring to. And Bruce is really, he just has so many ideas. The trick with producing him is to make sure that you get the good ones, and the busyness is, not doesn't intrude. But Bruce does certain things, particularly things like It Gets Better, that's like that New Orleans kind of thing with an edge to it that is just unique to him. And then, of course, Chad Wackerman plays on The Stars, the Snow, the Fire, which was it's a remix from my orchestra record, where I actually mixed Chad and John Patitucci and the harpist Laurie Andrews. I mixed them much more to the front on this mix, so that you really can appreciate what they did. And Chad, of course, is just, from Frank Zappa all the way to James Taylor. The guy just knows how to play with orchestral music, and that's an 8.5 minute scored piece that requires a creative drummer, but also somebody who knows how to play with an orchestra, which is a little different. They don't breathe and groove the same way a rhythm section does. Kevin, I see you smiling. From playing an orchestra, clarinet and bassoon, they can certainly play in good time, but strings in particular have a way of floating through it where they're with it, they're right with the click track, but they're not going to go. They just don't do that, and so
they're just too darn graceful. That's all.
Well, and you want that, right? You want that sort of musicality, but combining that, for taking a drummer like Chad Wackerman, who's got perfect time and great groove, he has to still get that across, but being with them, not just doing, here's how it should be, and I don't care if they aren't with me. He has to thread that needle. So he was exactly the right guy for that song.
Okay, now what we're going to do, we're going to play another track from your album. Before then, I've just got to very, very quickly say, totally taken away. We alluded then to the days of the fax machines and how the world has changed. I'm a firm believer that if COVID, and as bad as it's been, if it had happened in the 1990s, with fax machines, it's like that. So we spoke to Brian Bromberg a few weeks ago, and he's got his new album, A Little Driving Music, and he was saying how the brass section was in Puerto Rico and the drummer was somewhere else. And so we get that, and it's amazing. And I don't think a lot of the listeners understand it. They go, what you mean? How is it? So it's brilliant. Now, before we play a track, your albums never fail to please me. On the radio shows and that, they're so different. And your previous album, Into the Lights. Now, we were going to have an interview, the two of us.
Yeah, we can talk about that too.
Well, that album, when I heard that, the 25th album, I actually thought you'd never surpass that. I thought that was the most amazing album, and I still play it very frequently. You've come out with your new album, to which we're going to feature another track for a bit now, and I Will Still Be Here. On my Jazz Mood show last night, I featured 2 tracks. First time ever to be played in Europe last night. And I had quite a few, the switchboard and the message were coming going, where can I get this new album? So already the message is out there. And it's a
Great. Thank
album.
you.
No problem. It's absolutely brilliant. We're going to play a track from that album there. And I want to come back in a minute and to ask you about the influences that came about from this album. I will still be here for you. But before then, I just think for our listeners now, because there may be some people in a distant far land somewhere, maybe going, Ken Navarro, I've never heard of him. So I think it's about time we play a track, and so everyone can come around. We're going to play a track called Embrace, and I'd like to find out where you came out with the idea for Embrace. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Jazz Across the Pond. We're talking to the wonder Mr. Ken Navarro, and the album is called I Will Still Be Here. We're going to play Embrace, and we'll be straight back with this wonderful interview. Stay tuned with us.
Welcome back to Jazz Across the Pond, Jazz Interviews Reimagined with the Jazz Cat and Mr. G. We've been listening to Embrace from Ken Navarro's amazing new project, I Will Still Be Here. And I might mention 2 singles from I Will Still Be Here have already charted. Embrace and Summer Smiles both have cracked the charts. Not bad for a project that was just released days ago. So congratulations there.
Thank you.
Ken, your music has charted extremely well over the 30 plus years with multiple projects and songs climbing the charts. We've watched you watch your music evolve over the decades as you've incorporated touches like R&B horn sections or a string quartet or brass quintets or a funky horn section. Each project seems to open a creative door to the next project. Taking everything into consideration, what is it about your projects that you think speaks to so many people?
I think it's probably the melodic elements. Rhythm is like super important. We all, like we were just talking about drummers, and we all respond to that in ways that we don't even realize. And the harmonic elements are really important too. And I love harmony. I mean, I was a voice major in college because they didn't know what to do with a guitarist. And so I love harmony in general, but melody, I think, is what pulls people in. And I remember early on a couple people saying to me, "Oh, you're so good with melody." And I always thought that melody was my weakest thing. And so I spend a lot of time on it. I write a lot of melodies, like Embrace. The melody that we heard is the one that I ultimately came up with and honed in on. But I really worked that melody a lot, I'm talking specifically about the chorus. So for me, I think that's what it is. I like to think that people are relating to the fact that I really try to do things from the heart, that I only do things that I really believe in, which means taking chances sometimes, and sometimes people get it and sometimes they don't. But I think over time, I've developed a fan base that expects me to do what you said, Kevin, which is to keep evolving, and to have the projects feel like they are naturally going from one to the next, but yeah, I guess the simple answer to that question is the emphasis on melody. And maybe it's good that I, 25 years ago decided that was my weakest thing, so that I focused on it so much. And maybe I've finally got it as good as I think my other abilities are. I don't know. It's something I still work on all the time.
Wow, it's absolutely fun. Now, here's a question for you. Can you remember the first time where you heard one of your songs on the radio? What were you doing?
Yes.
Where were you?
Yes. Well, I was in Los Angeles. The River Flows came out when we were right around the time we were moving from Los Angeles back to the East Coast. And we stayed in the LAX, the Los Angeles airport, a hotel right there. And we had our 3-year-old and my wife and I, waiting to wake up in the morning and take a plane back east after living in LA for almost 10 years. And I really couldn't sleep. And I had the station on The Wave, which in LA was sort of a precursor to all the smooth jazz stations. The Wave was around since like 88 and 89. And they played a song of mine called Thinking of You. And 11:30 at night when I couldn't sleep, it came on. And it was just, if you've ever seen that movie, That Thing You Do, where they're running around, and when they hear, I felt like that, except it was 11:30 in a hotel room with my toddler son sleeping. And I just basically had to go, listen, as quietly as I could.
Yes, it's my song. It's my song.
I know. I can't. So yeah, no, I remember that moment. And I bet if you ask other artists that question, as I imagine you do, you get a similar response. I can't imagine anybody who goes, "Wow, I don't know. It must have just been on. I don't know." No, that was the moment. And then the next minute, the next day, we took a plane back to the East Coast and have been here 31 years since.
So I'd imagine that did you ring the radio station? Sorry, can you just repeat, who was the artist again, please?
Well, I don't want to. I was not too bad about that stuff, but there were times where I think more because of the record company, that, you know, people that worked for us in the record company would call some stations and go, we'd really like to hear more of that Ken Navarro. But we tried not to stoop to that level too much.
No names, but there was, we don't ask that question every time, but there was a lovely lady from Miami. Well, it's Lisa Adio, the available. And we asked her that question, and apparently she was driving and she braked so fast there was a bucket of bananas behind her. It jumped into the passenger seat beside her. She braked so suddenly in that.
Oh my
God! Crash on the freeway.
That sounds about right.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Well, Ken, if I might, I'd like to draw back to September the 21st, 2018, when you released a very special project for me, given my background. And we're talking about your 24th solo album, Music for Guitar and Orchestra, which features 8 tracks scored and arranged for orchestra and guitar. It's a wonderful addition, if I might say, to your catalog of music.
Thank you.
But if you would, tell our viewers about the experience of scoring and arranging for an orchestra, and also, what was the inspiration for the project? How was the orchestra selected, and what was your writing process?
Wow, what a great series of questions, truly.
Pick one. And
yeah, I'll give you the quick version, which is that the album that preceded it was called Bonfire, an album on which I played every single instrument and relied on nobody. And then the next album I did was an album that involved 65 plus musicians, a conductor, an assistant, and relied on everybody. So I went from one extreme. Yeah, thank you. Wow, that's great, Roger. You're good. So I went from one album that, you know, was really self,
right,
you know, represent to an album that required a very big leap of faith. It took me about 2 years to score it all because I wrote every single note. I had people who I bounced things off of who were very helpful, but in the end, you know, they were just saying that doesn't work, that works, that could be better, that's great, make more things like that. They were more pushing me to get better and better at it. The inspiration for doing it's a seed that's been planted in my mind for a long time. There's always been a parallel track with me of loving, for lack of a better word, classical music. I've been playing with it and leaning that way for about 12 years. I got to a point where I was financially able to make a record that involved an orchestra, because that is no small expense. When you're in the studio, you know that thing where you watch the electric meter go round and round and go, my God, what's this air conditioning cost me? Well, that album was that times 1,000, you know, where you, in fact, one thing I did, Kevin, was I spent a lot of time making sure that every single note, every articulation, every phrase mark in every single individual part was locked down correct. Because when you're paying the equivalent of about, I don't know, $600 for every 10 minutes that go by, and people are raising their hand going, do you mean an F sharp there? Is that really an eighth note? You know, that makes other people raise their hand and start questioning. And you suddenly spending thousands of dollars answering questions or fixing notes, you know? So that was a big part of my work, was after everything was done, I still had to go and make sure that every single thing was right. And there's a lot of notes. And of course I did all the bowing, like all of the strings, all of their bowing. Otherwise that will make a session come to a standstill. Right. You have to wait for the violins to decide, are we going to up bow here or down bow? You know, that was all done and thought about and planned. And so, and then I called a conductor, an old friend of mine from LA, Jonathan Merrill, who's one of the few people I know who knows how to talk to an orchestra, but understands music with groove, you know. And then finally, the other part of your question was selecting the orchestra. Fortunately, in the DC area, we have a number of great orchestras, but we have a number of excellent military bands that frankly are as good or better than some of the orchestras that are here. I mean, they are like the best. And they all know how to play everything. So me and my two assistants One was what we call a contractor. That's the one that calls people and sets it up. And the other one, who was just my overall assistant for many things, Dan LeMaestro. I couldn't have done this without him. We handpicked just the right trumpet players, just the right French horn players, that these guys could read anything. They were comfortable with odd time signatures. They could play to a click, but they had to also, have a feel for the music. So, so that when Chad was playing his drums or Dave Weckl was adding his drums, they were there. They just, like we were saying, they do feel it a little different, but they're right there. It's not like they're off. So anyway, it was a lifelong ambition to be able to do this, but it required that, one, I teach myself how to do it, and then two, I had to actually do it in such a way that worked both for the jazz side of it and for the instrument side.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you.
Lady time is running out of us very, very fast than that, and we could carry on this conversation forever. And very, very quickly, and I know there was a wonderful story with Steely Dan on the album Pretzel Logic. It was on analog, and two of the tracks they actually pressed press and they deleted both those tracks. And Steely Dan have never gone back in the studio and recorded those songs again. They went, that was it. No, it's a true story from that album there. Anyway, very quick. So where can anybody get this album at all, Ken? Where can they buy it?
Well, it's, Amazon, iTunes. In the States, it's in some of the stores that are left. The towers that still exist all have it around the world. I'm getting emails from people who are buying it in the Tokyo Tower. But it's on my website, of course, and that's the only place you can get an autographed one. And if it makes you feel even more special, it's me who's putting the stamps on there too. So it's definitely, I like it when people buy it directly from me. I like the personal touch. Of course, there's no middleman when people buy it that way. But I'm fine with however people do it. And, Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, I'm very grateful, as I mentioned earlier, that those streaming services are supporting my music very well, and people are finding it that way. So I'm good with however people want to do it.
I'm going to have to see if I can request very nicely if you'd autograph a copy for me and send it to me. So, Ken, where can people see you on tour then? Going ahead now.
Well, I'm going to get out there and play. I'm pretty picky these days about what I do, because my music, I want to represent the best of what I've done and the way I've developed. And that can sometimes be difficult to do when you're faced with playing with what amounts to a pickup band, which is what happens at a lot of gigs. Now, these are great musicians in these, but you need time to really learn how to play certain music properly. So I'm kind of picky about it. I did accept a gig at the Mallorca Jazz Festival in Spain that was going to happen in October after being postponed last year, but unfortunately it's getting postponed again. And they've asked me to play the Algarve Festival in May of next year in Portugal. So I'm going to do that. I am playing a gig in Colorado, a theater show in Colorado Springs on October 1st. Me and Nelson Rangel, the great saxophonist, are doing a double bill. And it's always great to hear Nelson play and to just be near that kind of saxophone genius. And I'm waiting to see what other things will happen. I did get asked by a good friend of mine, great young saxophonist coming up named Tony Craddock Jr. He's putting together a virtual festival, and with me and 4 or 5 other people and Tony, and we're each contributing 3 or 4 songs virtually. So he hired me to do that. I'm going to do that. That'll be sometime in October. And I'm just sort of waiting to see what comes in. It's tough because between the travel limitations now, and as I was alluding to, the musical limitations that sometimes make it difficult for me to feel like I'm accepting a show that I can really give people what they're coming to see. It'll be, put it this way, when I do this show in Colorado Springs in October, it'll make almost 2 years since I last performed live. So between the pandemic and my reluctance to go out and just play any old show, I don't go out and play that often. So keep on my website. I keep it up to date. and I'm very active on social media. So anybody just go to either of my Facebook pages, my personal one or my band one, and follow me there. You'll definitely, find out anything that comes up via that one too.
Yeah, it's a very, very scary world, and every artist we talk to, they're all saying exactly the same thing, and that they're all so free. And I was talking to a British jazz artist, and in England, it's something like 65% of musicians, artists have given the art up, and they're now bricklaying, building fences and that, because there's no money, and
Well, I have some friends like that, and honestly, thank goodness they had another skill, because if you were relying just on performing, and many of the players that I work with, that's what they do. I'm thinking of one guy in particular who he's on this album, that if he didn't have this other skill, I don't know what he would have done, but he did, and he did really well. And he went on and he continued to meet some musicians who thought that he was a deck builder, and then only to find out that he was an amazing musician. But it kept him going. So yeah, it's a tough time. I'm one of the fortunate ones in that I, control my business in such a way that I'm not reliant on performing live to make a living. And so, but that's what 31 years of taking care of business. If I'd known, I would have been telling everybody to do. I just did what felt right to me, from a business standpoint. But yeah, it's a tough time. And as Roger, I've talked about, I have a mother who's 92 years old and very vulnerable, and I want to see her every week, and I want to be able to help her in whatever ways I can. And I can't be going and getting sick and then bringing that to a 92-year-old woman who lives with a whole lot of other people who are that age. And I'm sure you guys, I'm not alone with this sort of consideration. It's not just my health, it's who else I'm around too.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's one of the reasons that Kevin and myself came up with this concept of Jazz Across the Pond, because there's so many artists that were coming out with albums, they're unable to go out and tour to promote the album, and we saw this as a platform, and it was like, great, let's just go it. And
well, it's great for artists for sure, and your timing is excellent too. Because let's face it, everything, whether it's a real challenge like dealing with COVID, or something else, these are also opportunities for people who are thinking of new creative ideas. And you guys doing this, especially the idea of Across the Pond, which I love, just such a great concept, its timing is exactly right, not just for the artists, but for the audiences too. I was doing some free virtual concerts via Facebook Live when this first started to happen. Yes, they went well with promoting my album Into the Light back then, but I just told you how nuts I get about the way my music is presented. So you can imagine I wasn't wild about the way standing in front of a phone and playing live into it with no audience. But when I saw the way people reacted, the same way they're reacting to you guys giving them this, I just went, it doesn't matter how they like it, periods. It doesn't matter that it's perfect. What matters is that you're reaching out to people at a time like this when they need it. And unfortunately, who thought this far into it we'd still be needing it, but we do. So thank you to you guys from me, but also to the audience that's out there that gets to get in-depth information about a lot of the music that they love, and find out about stuff that they didn't even know might have been around otherwise, because people aren't out there playing.
I'll bring up something real quick. Roger's always trying to drop something on me during an interview to surprise me, because I'm not aware of it. So now it's my turn. Roger, you don't realize it, but I guess we might as well admit this. Ken and I are the same age. We were born 3 days apart.
Is that right?
Yeah, you were talking about 90-year-old mom. It was a long and difficult labor for mom, but Ken was born 3 days before I was. So we're actually brothers. We haven't told anybody, but no, in all seriousness, next time you see your mom, tell her there's a young 68-year-old out there waiting to be adopted by her.
All right, I will. She'll appreciate that. She's I taught her on her Echo to say, play Ken Navarro music. Oh. So I got her an Echo.
She wasn't brainwashed already.
I know. I got her an Echo just so she could, because she's at the point where she forgets what day it is. things like that. I got her one so that she could simply ask it.
Nice.
You know, I even put all her reminders. She has a daily schedule, and every day I have it read it to her 7 times a day. I do it at night, even if I'm, 100 miles away. I get it so that, she'll appreciate hearing that somebody that I spoke about her on somebody's interview program all the way over in the UK too.
But what I would say is I don't think we're going to need any echoes or Alexas or anything to be request your music, because I know on Kevin's show, the Smooth Jazz Train, my show, when I played 2 of your tracks last night on jazz, I did a special tribute last night to Charlie Watts, and I featured 2 of the tracks on there, and literally, and people ring up going, when can I get this now? So
and I am spinning Embrace tonight on the Smooth Jazz Train. So
I'll check it out.
Roger posted you last night. I'm posting you tonight. So
what time is your show on tonight, Kevin?
7 to 8.
7 to 8
on Facebook.
I will probably be driving them, but I'll have it going anyway. I'll just have my phone going. Oh, that's great to hear. Thank you for thanks in advance for doing that. And thank you last night, Roger. And I saw the Charlie Watt, the post on Facebook about the show, and actually shared it on my page. What an interesting guy. And just, I had no idea. I hadn't heard the stories that he was ill and wasn't going to be able to do, the current tour. And it was quite a shock to me of all of the Stones, right? I mean, that's the joke, right? That Keith is still walking around, and here's Charlie Watts, who was the one who really took care of himself, a total gentleman, really a jazz musician, let's face it, who found himself in a lifelong career in a rock band.
Well, David Benoit messaged me, and he said, listen, Roger, he said, I could see he was a jazz drummer. He said, the way he was holding the sticks, he said, I knew he was a jazz drummer, but it's right. A lot of people just thought he wrote that. Yeah, and they were listening to my show last night. They went, we had no idea he was a jazzer. Oh yeah, that was, and
even the way that he would kick off some of the Stone songs was not, some drummers, the kickoff to Jumpin' Jack Flash would be bang, bang, Charlie was like, boom, boom. He just had a finesse that was different, and a kind of a groove that was like between him and Keith, because that's really what their groove was, those two. It was this like swampy kind of thing, that only a jazz drummer would have brought to that, But it was a real loss, and something that I guess we're going to have to, get used to this as we get older.
And he's actually only living less than 100 miles from where I'm living now. So
wow.
Wow. Never, but I knew I had to do a tribute to a show.
Oh yeah, it's very important, I think.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we're watching the wonderful Ken Navarro, and we can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to chat to us.
My pleasure.
The album is called I Will Still Be Here. Well, I'll tell you something, Kevin and myself will still be here next week, because we're hoping to get Adam Hawley on the show next week.
Oh, yeah. Good. Tell him I said hi.
Yeah, we certainly will. Ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful Ken Navarro, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today.
My pleasure, you guys. And thank you to you, Roger, and you, Kevin, for doing this. And again, an honor to be asked, and look forward to doing it another time.
Say goodnight, Kevin.
Good night, Kevin.
Good night from me. From everybody here, Jazz Across the Pond. Stay gay, safe, look us up, and good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.